Hi, this is Brian Hopkins, the Exhausted Moderate. This is an 8-minute video that answers the question, will our 2026 elections be free and fair? I read the documents, scored the claims, and bring you just the facts and a touch of common sense. Here is what I found. Technically, they likely will be, but the maps wars are raging and one side is winning. This is what every citizen of our democracy needs to know.
Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've been tuning into the news at all lately, you already know the anxiety around the upcoming November 2026 election is at an absolute fever pitch. But today, we're bypassing all of that hyper-partisan noise. We aren't going to focus on the fiery political rhetoric or those cinematic worst-case scenarios. Instead, we're looking strictly at the structural reality of our election system, using nothing but primary data and documented evidence. Okay, let's untangle this mess with a clear roadmap. We're covering sorting the election mess, the integrity debate, the interference claims, the map wars, the quiet harm, and finally, the November 2026 reality.
So Section 1. Sorting the election mess.
Right now, there are two insanely loud, competing partisan frames dominating the news. On one side, you've got the integrity frame. This argues that mail-in voting and non-citizen registration are corrupting elections, meaning we urgently need federal verification. On the flip side, we have the interference frame, which argues the administration is executing an unprecedented federal effort to take operational control of state-run elections. Now, both of these frames actually make a principled point, right? Election rolls absolutely should be accurate, and state sovereignty over elections is a very real constitutional principle. But, as we're going to see, both of these frames also suffer from some major evidentiary gaps.
Which leads us to Section 2. The integrity debate.
The math here has a really fascinating twist. The data we're looking at comes directly from the Heritage Foundation's own election fraud database. That's the exact data set frequently used to justify sweeping federal interventions. Yet when you actually break those numbers down, out of over 1,500 proven fraud cases spanning 4 decades and all 50 states, only 68 involve non-citizens, literally less than 5%. So the primary data simply doesn't support the sweeping policy.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the integrity frame's preferred legislative vehicle, the Save America Act, hit an absolute brick wall. Back on April 22, 2026, an attempt to bypass the filibuster failed in a 48-50 vote. Why? Well, largely because 4 Republican senators, Murkowski, Collins, McConnell, and Tillis, defected to vote it down. The empirical evidence of fraud was just too thin to overcome genuine conservative concerns about federalism and state rights. So as of today, the SAVE Act is procedurally dead for this session.
Shifting gears a bit, let's look at Section 3, the interference claims. Now, the documentary evidence supporting the core of the interference frame is undeniably strong. This isn't speculation, it's right there on the public record. Over the last 14 months, the White House and the Department of Justice have initiated multiple, highly aggressive measures to assert federal authority over election administration. We're talking about Executive Order 14248 from March 2025, a second executive order from March 2026 aimed at compiling state citizenship lists, a wave of DOJ lawsuits against at least 15 states demanding complete voter rolls, and direct outreach to state and local election officials by the Department of Homeland Security. These actions are very real.
Now, here's the crucial point the interference frame totally misses, or at least tends to underplay. The federal courts are acting as a load-bearing wall here. The administration takes an action, and bam, the courts step in. Preliminary and then permanent injunctions actually blocked the most expansive provisions of that 2025 executive order. And between February and April of 2026, 5 different federal district courts dismissed the DOJ's voter roll lawsuits on the merits. The reality is, the administration has actually lost in court way more than it's won when it comes to these substantive, ballot-moving provisions. The judicial system is holding the line.
So if the SAVE Act is stalled and the executive orders are largely tied up in court, what is actually going to shape this election? Well, as we pivot away from the noise of these loud distractions to the actual signal, I want you to keep this fundamental thesis in mind. The election won't be rigged, the map will be.
And that brings us to Section 4, the map wars.
While everyone was totally fixated on those federal lawsuits, a massive legal shift happened quietly at the Supreme Court. On April 29, 2026, the court handed down a 6-3 ruling in a case called Louisiana v. Calais. This ruling invalidated Louisiana's second majority black congressional district, holding that drawing it specifically to comply with the Voting Rights Act was itself an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. The practical effect here? It's huge. It significantly narrowed Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. This ruling effectively lowered the legal floor that constrains partisan map drawing. And get this, just 5 days later, Florida cited this exact precedent as legal cover when their governor signed a new congressional map bypassing the state's own anti-gerrymandering laws.
And this leads us right into the sheer math of the map wars. We are currently witnessing the largest coordinated mid-decade redistricting cycle in modern American history. Both parties are aggressively using their state house majorities to redraw maps in their favor. But it's not a perfectly symmetrical fight. According to the authoritative tracker from the nonpartisan Cook Political Report, Republican-led redistricting has produced roughly 13 new GOP edge seats, while Democratic-led counter-redraws have produced roughly 10 new Democratic edge seats. This asymmetry results in a net structural advantage of 3 to 4 House seats for Republicans before a single vote is even cast. The gerrymandering doesn't just wash out, it tilts the floor.
Let's move to Section 5, the quiet harm. Beyond the maps and the math, there's a very real human element to this story that neither partisan frame is fully addressing right now. According to a 2026 survey by the Brennan Center, an incredible 50%, literally half of all local election officials, are currently worried about political leaders interfering with their work. Even more alarming, 45% specifically fear politically motivated investigations into themselves, a fear driven directly by the DOJ's recent posture towards state and local election workers.
You see, the real structural danger to our elections isn't the cinematic, headline-grabbing fear of federal agents physically seizing polling places. No, it's the quiet reality of an empty county clerk's office. A free and fair election relies entirely on the experienced workforce that runs the precincts, programs the machines, and counts the ballots. When those dedicated locals walk away because of relentless pressure and fear of prosecution, they either get replaced by political appointees or those jobs are just left vacant. And that is when the entire administrative foundation of a free and fair election actually begins to crumble.
All right, wrapping things up with Section 6, the November 2026 reality.
Synthesizing all this data, what are we actually facing? First, let's establish what would truly constitute a failed election. A free and fair election standard is met or unmet by specific events, not just some general vibe. Here are the concrete benchmarks. A successful federal attempt to bind state mail ballots to a federal eligibility list. Mass disqualification of registered voters. Federal officers actively intimidating voters at the polls. Coordinated refusals to certify state results. Or a national emergency executive order seizing election machinery. Those are the true failure conditions. And critically, as of today, none of these have successfully materialized. The law and the courts are holding them back.
Therefore, based on the concrete evidence we have right now, the outcome of November 2026 won't be dictated by dramatic ballot fraud, nor will it be decided by a sudden federal takeover. The election will be free and fair in the technical sense. Eligible voters will absolutely cast their ballots under existing state laws, those ballots will be counted, and the results will be certified. But what those votes actually produce will be structurally tilted by the quiet redrawing of congressional districts under a newly weakened Voting Rights Act.
So I leave you with this. If our ballots are counted freely, but the underlying map artificially distorts our representation in the House, what does that actually mean for the legitimacy of our government going into the 2028 presidential cycle? It's a profound distinction between basic election integrity and true democratic representation. I really hope this explainer gave you the signal beneath the noise to watch exactly how this all unfolds.
Thanks for watching to the end. I hope this gave you some food for thought. If it did, please share it with some friends, and don't forget to subscribe at the link here or in the first comment to this video if you found it on social. The subscription is always free. You'll get special early access and emails so you can receive more pieces like this. This is Brian Hopkins, the Exhausted Moderate.